something real quickly with you guys. We've been given some direction by our hosts, and I thought I'd share it so we all understand what we're in. This direction is procedural. First off, I, as chair, am to tell you to remind you to sign in on the sign-in sheet in the back, if you have not. We also are going to start doing roll call, but rather than roll call, what we'll do is we'll go around and do self-introductions up on the dais like we always have. But we're going to have to record the names, and this to ensure that we have a quorum. And we'll do it before we convene the meeting, and it takes 11 for a quorum here. You evidently, I hadn't read my email today since I was there this morning. You are getting an email now, and we will all get one Monday before the meeting, in which you're asked to confirm your attendance, or an alternate will confirm attendance, and that's to ensure that there will be a quorum. Otherwise, we're just here to discuss and no actions get taken. And then there's some instructions for the chair to make sure that we report actions taken for each agenda item, and whether in the option of doing it by consensus or vote. And in my experience, we've always done actions that require a recommendation by vote, and consensus was usually for agenda items, but you can correct me if I'm wrong. And I'll ask one last thing, which staff asked us, and that is when we do self-introductions, make sure your mic is on, please, so it goes on the recording. It's public record. So why don't we start with self-introductions?
Tony Coe, SWAT. Eric Hugh, City of Pleasant Hill, Transpac.
Michael Tanner, BART.
Jerry Fay, Contra Costa County.
John Cunningham, Contra Costa County.
Paul Reinders, City of Transplan.
Andy Dillard, Town of Danville and SWAT.
Chad Smalley, City of Richmond, WICTAC.
Jim Conradi, AC Transit.
Yvette Ortiz, City of El Cerrito and WICTAC.
And I'm Tom Horace from Tri-Delta Transit. Can we do the audience while we're here as well, please?
I'm Matt Kelly, CCTA staff. Walter Allen with Parsons. I'm helping out CCTA in status maternity leave.
Brad Beck, Contra Costa Transportation Authority.
Hisham Raimi, CCTA staff.
Kavya Sambana with ITERIS.
Zachary Chuck, Caltrans Planning. James Kinkamp, City of Lafayette.
The meeting is officially convened, and the first item we will take care of is public comment. Is there any? Seeing none, we'll move on to approval of summary actions from the last meeting, which was August 27th. Do we have a motion? Discussion?
Second.
Oh, okay. It's, what's the word? My brain just went blank. Oh, it was motion by Jerry and second by Jim. It's root beer, man. On the consent calendar, we have the attendance log from the last meeting and a funding summary. Do we have a motion for approval?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Jerry moves, and I'm sorry. Andy, thank you. Second. We move on to regular agenda items, of which we have 3 today. The first is project monitoring, and Isham is going to. Okay, Walter will do.
My name is Walter Allen, and I'm presenting the project monitoring report. So we have 3 parts of that. That's the STIP project status report, the federal aid project status report, and the inactive obligations report. So each of these, each month you receive a report and giving you an update on what the status of projects is. If there's anything that looks like it might be coming up against some sort of deadline or schedule, just something CCTA provides so that agencies don't lose the money that's been obligated. So that information is here. If you have any questions, I'm glad to answer that or look into it. But it's pretty much self-explanatory. If you're on the list, then you know that your project is under concern.
Questions, discussion? Okay, thank you, Walter.
All right, thank you.
Next item is the draft resolution, or the draft results of the 2015 CMP traffic monitoring, and Matt Kelly looks like he's prepared.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. My name is Matt Kelly, CCTA staff. I'm here with Kavya Sambana from Iteris, from their Berkeley office, and we're here to present the draft results for the 2015 CMP monitoring. As you probably know, every 2 years we update the congestion management program as required by state law. The draft CMP is currently out there on our website for review. This is kind of a separate document that goes along with it. It's where we go out and actually monitor the system. The CMP network is a subset of our routes of regional significance. The network and intersections were established back in 1991 and haven't really changed, though there are a few changes to the freeway system that we monitored this year, and I'll let Kavya explain that. But basically, we were out there in the spring. We've got some draft level of service results for you. In your packet, you'll find a copy of the actual report, but the detail is in the appendices, which are available via a separate link from our website. So if you're looking for the count sheets, the synchro sheets, those are all on the website because it's about, 300 pages or so. So I'm going to turn it over to Kavya, and she's going to explain the process that Iteris went through in their monitoring. We did some different things this time around, using some different data, updating our analysis methodology, and I'm going to hand it over to her.
Thank you, Matt, for the introduction. Have a few slides here that we can go through today. Right. Good afternoon, everyone. As Matt mentioned, this is about the draft results for the 2015 Congestion Monitoring Program. So a quick agenda starts with an introduction, then we'll discuss about the methodology, the collection effort, and the analysis done, then a brief overview of the results both for the freeways and the intersections, and then some trend analysis comparing the 2013 results with the 2015, and finally the recommendations. So the map there shows a quick overview of the complete CMP network. It's both freeways and intersections. There are a total of 23 freeway segments that we monitored in 2015, and a total of 65 intersections. Most of them, 45% of them, are in the Central County, 40% in the West County, and the remaining in the East County, as you see there. So what's new to 2015? It's those two segments that you see there towards the right, highlighted in circle. That's basically due to the new opening of the State Route 4 bypass. So one segment that runs along State Route 4 is from the intersection of State Route 160 and to Sand Creek Road, and the other one is along SR 160 between the bridge and the State Route 4 intersection. So let me walk you through some of the details with the data collection and the data analysis. For the monitoring race, it's the spring of 2015 that we conducted all the data from. It's like previous years, it was conducted between the weekdays of Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. So we excluded any public holidays, and we made sure there were no days that were included on which construction was happening or any incidents were occurring. Also, we made sure that the spring break holidays were excluded for the data collection with respect to the field data for the intersection counts. In terms of the data sources for the intersection, it's again field data like previous monitoring cycles. The turning moment counts from the fields. But what's new in 2015 is the data that we used for the freeways. It's basically the commercial speed data that we've tried new to this 2015 monitoring. So the validation results that were conducted prior to the monitoring has resulted in this change. More details on the validation results can also be found in the appendix of the draft report. But just to give you a little bit overview, this commercial speed data is provided from INRIX. This is basically bought by MTC for the whole of Bay Area, and it is provided for free to all the CMEs to conduct their monitoring. And just a little bit overview of INRIX itself. INRIX is a private provider of speed data, third-party speed sources. Some of you may have heard about it. So what it does, it aggregates traffic from GPS vehicles, mobile devices, other data sources at 1-minute intervals, and it associates and reports it at a TMC level. We'll give you a little bit more detail on that in this following slide, where I explain the data analysis steps. So what is this TMC? This TMC, just to give you an overview, is nothing but a roadway segment along which INRIX reports speeds. So let me walk you through a little example here. The red line you see is the CMP segment, and the violet or the purple are all the TMCs associated with it. So this is an example down from South Bay along US 101, but the CMP segment is about 0.85 miles. And what we do in the first step is map or conflate each CMP to its corresponding TMC segments. So in this case, we see that there are 3 TMC segments that are overlapping with this CMP segment. So this first process helps us map or conflate all the different TMCs within Contra Costa County to each and every CMP freeway segment. So once that's done, so there are more details in here, but I'll skip that due to the time constraint. But once that conflation is done, what we do is aggregate these both spatially and temporally to compute the average CMP speeds. Again, new to this 2015 monitoring is how we computed this, like using average speeds as opposed to the 85th percentile that was done in 2013. Once again, this was recommendation based on the validation report that was conducted earlier. So finally, the LOS assignment is similar to the last time using highway capacity manual methodologies. Now, with respect to the intersections, again, things have changed a little bit this year. This is per the CCTA technical guidelines. So we've moved to monitoring the intersections and assigning LOS again per highway capacity manual 2010 and 2000, which is delay-based methodology, as opposed to what happened in 2013, which was CCTA LOS methodology. So that's new to the intersection analysis again. And so in order to do that, what we've done is undertaken some extensive review and update of the existing intersection files in a software called Synchro to compute the LOS. And for the intersection, apart from the auto LOS, we also have additional data with respect to the bike and pedestrian counts as well. So that's a brief overview of the methodology. So let's move on to some of the results, which may be more interesting here. So how did we do in 2015? This is a graph that shows the freeway performance. This is showing how many centerline miles are grouped in different LOS levels. So you can see that majority, that's about 80-ish miles, that's 40% of the whole network is operating as LOS A. And half of it, about 20% of it, is like at LOS F, And in terms of the high-level summary for the freeways, out of all the 23 segments, one segment was found not to be achieving the established LOS standard in the AM peak, and 2 segments in the PM peak. Let's take a look at that graphically, so visually. So this is a map that shows the same results in the different bins, LOS A to F. As you can see, there's a lot of red, LOS F, but not all of these are identified as not exceeding. It's just this one segment along westbound State Route 24 between I-680 and Oak Hill Road. This has exceeded the LOS standards for 2015 monitoring. And in the PM, you again see similar reds, but in the opposite direction. And the 2 segments that did not meet the standards are one in the eastbound direction along State Route 4, that's between I-680 and the State Route 242. This is same as 2013, so nothing changed with that. But what's new in the PM is the northbound I-680 from Bollinger Canyon to El Cerrito Boulevard. That's new to 2015. Maybe some of you members who must be driving to CCTA committee meetings in the evening have experienced this now and then from Donville or Sanderman. So that's the freeway results. Let's take a look at the intersections. So this graph again shows the number of intersections that have been performing been performing at different LOS. Majority of them are again within the LOS C and D buckets. That's in both AM and PM peak. And at LOS A and F, there are less than 10% of them. So the high-level summary, we found there's one intersection each in the AM and the PM that did not achieve the LOS standard. So let's take a look at them again in the graph. I'm not sure if it's identifiable, but there are 2 red dots that you can see. One, that's at Ignacio Valley Road at northbound I-680 ramps. So that is the one that's failing in the AM, that's exceeding in the AM peak. However, this was same as 2013, and it should be noted that this is not within CCTA jurisdiction. It's a Caltrans maintained intersection, so no recounts were necessary for this per CCTA policy. And the other tiny intersection that you see towards the left or the West County, that is also a Caltrans maintained intersection at I-80 ramps, and it is LOSF, but the standard itself is LOSF, so no recounts were necessary once again. Let's take a look at the PM peak. At the PM peak, this is new to 2015. There's this one intersection at Ignacio Valley Road and Cowell Road that did not meet the threshold. So this is new to 2015, and we are conducting recounts for this intersection and awaiting the results. So we'll do the reanalysis per CCTA policy and evaluate it for any deficiency. And probably CCTA will then eventually work with City of Concord with respect to this intersection. So those are the high-level results. Just want to give you some peek into the trend analysis of how these compare with 2013. So this graph here shows the comparison with the freeway LOS results between 2013 and 2015. So as you can see, the graph on the left and the right, they show AM and PM separately, and the bins in the red show what's the number of LOSF segments, and the change is quite significant. Like with the LOSF, clearly you could see that the number of freeway segments in 2015 between both F and E bins are more than 2013. With respect to the speed changes, this graph presents how for each corridor in the county, the speeds varied between 2013 and 2015. So both for the AM and PM peak, for majority of the corridors, we can see that this change in average speed is between 0 to 5 miles per hour, except for State Route 242, which fortunately did better this time. 2015 showed an increase in speed. But the other one, maybe that's what you're wondering about, the I-580, it did see good change in the average speed compared to 2013. However, what should be noted here is that there is definitely some increase in volumes and congestion, but the change in data sources and change in methodology also contributed to this change that you see widely, especially for I-580. Again, more details are provided in the appendix on these discrepancies a little bit, but it should be definitely noted that the change in data sources can also contribute to some of these changes you see here. So similar trends we can observe in the intersections as well. More worsening, that's LOSF and LOSE intersections increase in 2015 compared to 2013. And with respect to the number of intersections operating in different LOS bins, we saw different observations here, like in the AM peak and the PM peak, the number of intersections that did not change LOS between 2013 and 2015 are about 10 to 14 of them. But in AM especially, there are few intersections where the LOS changed more than 3 level of service scores, as you can see towards the left of the graph there. So what does these results indicate? Like clearly, bearing the methodology and the data sources, clearly they indicate an increase in traffic, an increase in volume. So what we've done is we've also looked at some of the employment statistics that we pulled from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. That's what you see on the graph there. So the blue line shows the trend in employment between January 2013 to 2015. They're about increase of 4% in the jobs within this period for the region. And we observed this by overlaying with the delay trends we were able to compute from PEMS. So as you can see, there's a clear correlation between the employment and the delay in freeway that you can get for the region. So if these continue in the future, we can expect similar trends in the performance in the next monitoring cycle. Apart from these results, we also wanted to look at the current and the future improvements that can help ease some of the congestion. So some of these improvements along State Route 4, the hot lanes and the express lanes on I-680, all these will help ease congestion and increase mobility. So these can be monitored carefully, and hopefully the congestion will be eased and improved during the next monitoring cycle during some of these corridors which have these improvements planned in the next couple of years. So finally, some recommendations. So with respect to the freeway monitoring, as I've mentioned before, this is the first time we've moved to using big data or INRIX for monitoring the freeways. So that opens a lot of doors. What can we do? We can compute and we can monitor other metrics such as reliability and travel time indices. So that is a great advantage of big data, and that's one of the recommendations we put forward moving to the next monitoring cycle. So explore other metrics in terms of the reliability stuff, and also expand this to arterial monitoring. So INRIX data is available for arterials as well, apart from freeways. So what we could do is supplement the existing LOS as LOS monitoring for the intersections using the counts with INRIX, or even replace it to make the best use of the big data sources out there. And finally, you could also explore at other monitoring times like off-peak or weekend analysis, which is relatively easy using big data. So in terms of the intersection monitoring, the suggestions we have are to update the signal timings in Synchro for all the intersections that we are monitoring. So within the limited scope and budget and timeline of the project, we did look at and review a good amount of intersections, but some intersections could be further evaluated and updated with the current signal timing plans available from the member agencies. So that's one recommendation, excuse me. And the other one is being consistent with respect to reporting HCM 2010. So we reported the LOS of the intersections using both HCM 2010 and HCM 2000. So what we suggest is, again, do further investigation and make sure the results are reported consistently using HCM 2010 methodology. And finally, to wrap up, some other recommendations are use of additional big data sources, like there's exclusive bike and OD data out there, which could help understand the network from a bigger picture and other perspectives. So that could be explored. And finally, enhanced visualizations. I hope you like some of the maps better than all these graphs. So they speak a lot of words. So it's best to have these enhanced visualizations and interactive dashboards that is more user-friendly and help the public and the stakeholders understand all this results easily. Thank you. With that, we'll take any questions.
Thanks, Kavya. And I just wanted to add one other point, and that's, this comes up whenever we talk about monitoring, is the continued use of level of service as the metric. And, and this has to do with Senate Bill 743 from late 2013. We're still waiting for the State Office of Planning and Research to come up with their updated CEQA guidelines, and there's also another, I think, an assembly bill that's trying to get whatever changes come out of SB 743, if it's the move to VMT, that would bring that into the CMP legislation, because right now CMP will continue using LOS while the rest of the state has switched to VMT, or that's what we assume they're doing. So probably in the next year we'll have a final answer on that, whether we'll be the next cycle in 2017 will be using level of service, VMT, or we always have the choice to do both. If the state tells us we have to use VMT, we can still report level of service, which all jurisdictions have the option of doing under CEQA. As long as you're reporting VMT, you can also use level of service. So that's something when we get to the next monitoring cycle we can discuss. We'll definitely discuss that, and as well as the recommendations that Kavya made. If there's any changes you'd like to make to the monitoring, we can discuss it leading up to the next monitoring period. But so that's the report. I just want to let you guys know that all the appendices are online. That's for you guys to use. There will be a final report, but for now it's in draft mode. But all those count sheets and everything are available for you to review. We'd ask for you to review them and let us know if you see anything that looks out of whack. You as the owners and operators of these intersections, you're the most familiar with them, so we would appreciate any feedback you have on those. But also those are there for you to use for your own planning purposes. If you need counts, if you need level of service, if you need bike and ped counts, all that's available for you to use at those from those 65 intersections around the county, and then all the data's there if you need to stick it in a report or what have you. But Kavya and I are available for questions.
Thank you. You mentioned your recommendations to be consistent and use the Highway Capacity Manual 2010, but I understand that there are some issues with using 2010. Can you explain how to deal with that problem some engineers have with that methodology?
Sure. We've submitted some of our findings in a memo to Matt too. Some of the issues we found were between 2000 and 2010. It's the strict use of NEMA phasing and issues with analyzing more than 4 intersections and stuff like that. So these could be addressed with little hacks and little changes to the intersections itself in Synchro. But with respect to the bigger picture itself, probably what needs to be done is further analysis and wait for other literature out there. But I'm not really the traffic engineering person, so we have other staff answering these. So I can get more answers for you on some more technical details if you're interested.
No, I just wanted to be clear as far as the recommendations. There are some adjustments you can make with the 2010 HCM. So we could conceivably all be using a 2010 basis methodology.
It's possible.
And then, if I may, I have one more question, that has to do with the deficiency plans. When and how do we determine when a deficiency plan is needed?
Okay, so Kavya noted the one intersection that we actually have to deal with. There were 2 Caltrans-operated intersections that we don't have to address. The one that we do is on the screen, Ignacio Valley at Cowell. I've been discussing it with its standard was LOSE. in the monitoring, it showed LOSF. We worked with Concord to make sure we were using the latest timing plans. We plugged those in, still LOSF. So at this point, Iteris has done 2 recounts in 2 different weeks, and they're analyzing that now. If those come up, if at least one of those comes up as F, that triggers it doesn't trigger the preparation of a deficiency plan. It triggers the deficiency plan process, which the first step is to do an exclusion study, which basically we kind of put together a working group of the affected jurisdictions and the upstream jurisdictions, which might include yours. But basically at that point, we're able to do an exclusion study which you're able to exclude regional traffic and traffic generated, I think, by certain income groups. There's a few different things you can exclude, and we're pretty confident that once you exclude the regional traffic, that wipes out the F. So hopefully we won't have to get all the way to a deficiency study, or a deficiency plan, but if we get another F there, we will move forward with the exclusion study.
Great, thank you.
Other questions? Okay, Matt, it's an action item. Do you want us to approve, accept?
Yeah, accept and just approve it being distributed for review. And we are accepting comment, especially from the cities on their own intersections.
Okay. Do we have a motion to accept?
Move staff recommendation.
That was, for the record, that was John Cunningham and Paul Reinders seconded. And we have it accepted. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
On to our final item today. Mr. Beck is going to help us prepare for the second OBAG and Measure J programs for 12 and 13.
I will. Thank you. I'm Brad Beck with the Contra Costa Transportation Authority, and I'm here to talk about preparing for OBAG 2 and for the programs 12 and 13. Those are Measure J programs, call for projects. NVC is scheduled to release their procedures and guidelines for OBAG 2 in November, maybe December. There's been some talk about that. And we will have until next September, we have a year, to review applications, release our own call for projects, review applications, and then submit a list of projects to MTC. At the same time, it's time to do another call for projects for Measure J Program 12, which is the TLC program, and Program 13, which is the Pedestrian, Bicycle, and Trail Facilities program. So what the short statement of request for the TCC is that we would like to have a subcommittee of the TCC help us look into how we might coordinate that call for projects to make the process a little simpler, maybe take advantage of using Measure J money as a match for the federal money in OBAG 2. Every program will have its own criteria that's either stated by MTC or in Measure J, so we'll have to work around those requirements as well. But the short thing is I'd like to ask for nominations, either from the members of the TCC who are here now or for alternates or other people. It doesn't have to necessarily be TCC members. I would also like to point out that there is a handout, and it's about the OBAG 2 program. Mostly the programs, as it says in the board letter, mostly the program is going to be as it was in terms of what you have to deal with. It will be as it was in OBAG 1. There'll be many of the same requirements. There will still be the same factors that we have to apply. Still the same requirement that 70% of the funds have to go to support development of the PDAs in Contra Costa. We will be getting a smaller share of funding. MTC has changed their funding formula. They're putting more emphasis on on two factors and less emphasis on others. And those two factors are the amount of housing that we, the county, have produced for affordable or lower income households, the actual amount, and the amount that is assigned to your jurisdictions through the RENA process. And since we haven't produced as many affordable housing units relative to other parts of the region, and our RENA allocation for those types of units in the future is lower than the rest of the region, we'll be getting less money. Last time we got about 14.1% of the OBAG funds. We'll get 13.1% this time. So that's a unfortunate change for Contra Costa. To get the money, there are two things that jurisdictions had to do. One, you have to have a certified housing element that's for this next RENA cycle, and many of you do. The other thing is that you have to comply with the complete streets requirements. And there is a proposal, it's still a proposal, and that's what's in your handout. This time, you have two options to comply with MTC's complete streets requirements. Either have to adopt a complete streets resolution that's consistent with MTC's model complete streets resolution, and I think 11 of the 20 jurisdictions, I can't remember what it's 9 or 11, about half of the jurisdictions in the county took that approach in OBAG 1. The other approach is that you revise your circulation element after January 1st, 2011 to comply with the Complete Streets Act of 2008. If you revised your general plan before January 1st, 2011 to comply with the Complete Streets Act, too bad. You'd have to do the Complete Streets resolution. And the big difference between OBAG, this proposed OBAG 2 approach, and the OBAG 1 approach is that you no longer can self-certify. You have to show that you've taken action after January 1st if you want to go 2011, if you want to go the revision of your circulation element route, and that revision was done, or at least you had one revision that was done to comply with the Complete Streets Act. So it has to be explicit. So that's about all I know about the details of the OBAG 2 program. So I'll ask you to make some recommendations for a subcommittee, if you will, and I'll try to answer any questions that you might have.
Why don't we take questions first, and then we can talk about our favorite subject around here, subcommittees.
I can. You indicated that TCC alternates could be on the subcommittee?
Yeah, or even we just want a subcommittee that can work with us to come up with a program and approach. And it doesn't even have to be TCC members, only that the subcommittee will be reporting to you. I mean, strictly speaking, subcommittee means a subset of your committee, but the alternates could serve. Yes.
I nominate Jamar Stamps from the county. But I also have a question. The difference between this that was placed here and what's in the packet, is that the 2010 to 2011 change, or are there additional differences in the packet? In the packet, I thought it said the revision to the circulation element of the general plan needed to be after January 1st, 2010. Maybe not.
Well, we just got an email this week from MTC staff, and this was taken directly out of the email.
Okay. Well, regardless, this is proposed to the MTC board at this time?
It's supposed to be part of the proposal that will be going for adoption. Originally, MTC staff has written November, but have said in meetings that it might be December.
Okay. You have any idea of the date? Seems, I'm sure there's an explanation, but without the explanation, it seems arbitrary.
It does seem arbitrary at first, especially, well, it isn't, actually, I think it's in the, no, it's not in the legislation.
Right.
The legislation is January 1st, 2010, but the OPR guidelines weren't adopted until December 2010. And I think that may be the reason. I'm going to talk to MTC staff about it because sort of concerned about why they chose that date and why jurisdictions could have done it anytime after the passage and signing of the Complete Streets Act. They, in theory, could have complied with that act with any revision after that point. Why not?
Well, I guess more to the point, I guess the county sort of falls between the cracks on the different guidelines, and in that we adopted a complete streets revision to our general plan before the bill was passed. Our general plan amendment was, I think it was listed in the ledge analyst report on the bill. But moving forward, MTC has always accepted that general plan amendment as being consistent with the Complete Streets Act. And I talked to Sean Coe a couple of months ago on this. I think he left MTC at this point, but he indicated, yeah, there shouldn't be any change to the OBAG process moving ahead that would rule out the county's general plan as being consistent with the guidelines. So it's some mixed messages here.
That's true, and that particular issue is one that I was going to raise with MTC staff because I think it's not really consistent with law. This law, I mean, MTC in theory could apply any kind of requirement within reason that they wanted to. They could make it within the, any revision within the last 3 years, or they could make it April 15th, 2012. They do have a fair amount of leeway. Nonetheless, it does seem a bit inconsistent to apply this somewhat arbitrary date. Not that anyone could do a revision of their circulation element between December 2010, when OPR adopted their guidelines, and January 1st.
That was going to be my next comment. If you're communicating with somebody at MTC, I guess, who would you suggest that I direct our comments to on this particular issue?
The person who had been working on OBAG retired and moved to Ithaca, New York. But I think probably, there are some new people, but Ross McEwen is the person that sent the email.
Kevin Mulder is Sean Coe's replacement.
Yeah, Kevin Mulder is Sean Coe's replacement. He's now the active transportation planner at MTC. MULDER.
Thank you.
I have a question. In the last OBAG, there was that component for local streets and roads by formula. Is that anticipated to also be the case in OBAG 2?
OBAG funds, one of the innovations that OBAG contained was that we had a lot more flexibility. Resolution 4035, which laid out MTC's approach for federal funding, allocating federal funding, and established the OBAG program, set out a number of purposes for which CMAs could allocate the OBAG funding. CMA planning was one, local streets and roads is one, TLC, bike ped, those are the four, safe routes to school. Those are and PDA planning also. Those were the main purposes, and if you could allocate the money in any way you wanted among those different purposes. The last time around, the authority made the decision to use the STP funds, the Surface Transportation Program funds, for CMA planning and local streets and roads. The local streets and roads money was allocated by formula to the jurisdiction. So every jurisdiction got some share of that funding. It would be up to the authority again to, if the authority wanted to make that decision. You allocate money to local streets and roads, you have less to allocate for other purposes. That's the decision. There are definitely needs for both those types of programs. Obviously a need for maintenance.
And then one other comment, if I may. So I've long been a big advocate of trying to align the TLC, PBTF, and OBAG and other programs in an effort to try to get to an environment where we have less applications to put together and less of the constant problem on grant-funded projects of everybody wanting to be the last money into the project, which makes it very difficult to start projects. So I'm curious whether the authority staff has put any thought into that as regards to these programs specifically, and if it has, if there's any ideas percolating there so far.
Not too much, a little bit. One of the difficulties, as I mentioned in my presentation, is that each of the programs have their own purposes and they have their own requirements. The OBAG money we have to use the factors that that MTC put on the OBAG funding. We have to, and 70% of the funding has to go to serve PDA development. The TLC money is allocated by formula to the RTPCs, who have to use the guidelines for that program to allocate funding for the purposes outlined in Measure J, which are somewhat different than the purposes for Program 13, which is a countywide competitive program. So those three things will make it difficult to do. Alameda CTC, when they allocated OBAG funding and OBAG 1 funding, they did what they call a coordinated call for projects. They didn't really, they did some coordination and they tried to do as simplified an application as they could, but given that they also had restrictions for the different funding pots, they're sort of more like three applications for three programs that happened at the same time.
There is overlap between TLC and OBAG, and my recollection is that OBAG, the first round of OBAG, there was sort of this idea floating out there that was coming to us that, folks wanted to see pretty big moves, big projects. I recall that message getting through in a few different forums. And it's without redevelopment now and without a lot of funding sources, it's really difficult to assemble a funding plan for a large project without getting these things a little closer aligned. So I'm interested in Alameda CTC's experience on that, actually, and maybe that's something I should look into more, but it's something I'm definitely interested in exploring.
And I would also note that as I've been going through the E76 and federal process for the PDA planning grants, that minimizing the number of projects that have to go through that process is a good thing. That would be a good thing if you could just spend the federal money on big projects and use the measure money on smaller projects, because there are a lot of well-deserving small projects out there. That would be good. That makes sense too.
I want to go back to the question regarding local streets and road money. So, Brad, if this committee wanted to say, convey a message regarding the need to maintain or continue what was done under OBAG 1 with respect to local streets and road, what's the best way to do that?
Well, just to make the recommendation that that's what the subcommittee thinks would be the best approach. That's part of the reason to have the subcommittee, is to think about that issue and make a recommendation on it.
So would that be something that comes out of the subcommittee that you're asking for? Or is that something that happens in this discussion?
Well, it'll come back to you to go, for you to recommend to the authority, the planning committee, and ultimately the authority. Yeah.
So I like the TCC members to, at least the ones from municipalities who have been clamoring for more attention to local streets and road, and kind of keep that in mind.
So, Tony, does that mean you'll volunteer for the subcommittee?
Sounds like a volunteer.
I would ask, we didn't get a very large list here. So if you have friends, relatives, colleagues you want to throw under the bus, this is your chance, because we didn't exactly develop a list of potential people for Brad here.
I'd like to nominate Chad Smalley to serve on the subcommittee. And I asked him before. I nominated him.
For the reasons I said earlier, I am interested in it, exploring these and seeing if there's a way to get there.
Others?
I'm going to volunteer Mary Halley from our staff to be on that subcommittee.
Are you getting all these, Brad?
Only got 3. It's not hard.
Either Deidre Heitman or myself, we will volunteer for the subcommittee. Transit representative, that is.
I think that could work.
All right.
How many are we looking for?
That's what I was going to ask.
You know,
Brad.
5 people would be great, I think. You know, if they're willing to come to meetings.
You offering pizza, cookies, something?
Coffee, at least.
Anyone else?
Brad, I would volunteer myself or Lisa Bobadilla from South County. We'll hash it out between the two of us, but
Okay.
I think somebody from South County would be good. And to Tony's point, we're one of the jurisdictions always looking for local streets and roads, of course. So
That's funny, Brad, because I was going to ask you if you needed specific representation or if we were going to follow Lisa's mantra and spread it around like peanut butter.
Well, actually, it's, I think the people who've been nominated or volunteered are pretty well done. There's not really anyone from Central County per se, but I think there are people who are well, Jamar's, you know, the county people do have experience in different parts of the county. If there's, actually, is there anyone here? Well, there's only one person, I think, from Central County. He's busy. He's got a newborn to deal with. He's sleep deprived, probably.
If you don't mind, I can consult with some of my other Central County colleagues who are not here today and see if any of them are interested.
That'd be great, if that's okay with the TCC members.
Any objections? What more do you need, sir?
I think since I've got the volunteers, I've got some input on that and on other things.
One more question. On page 5-3, there's the statement, projects located in high-impact project areas, especially PDAs taking on significant housing growth. Is that to say that there's going to be, you know, there's a distinction between PDA and non-PDA. There's going to be a further distinction between PDA and super PDA.
You invented a new term, John.
Well, it is a somewhat ambiguous criterion, but the idea, I think, is that yes, PDAs that aren't taken on that much growth would not, projects in those, serving those PDAs would not score as highly as ones that have a lot of growth in them.
Who defines
That's
the threshold?
could be a sliding scale, and that will be, excuse me, that'll be something that the review committee will have to think about, and the subcommittee first.
Well, this is that point in our program where we get to any new business or other items. Seeing none, we are adjourned.